Do you have preschool age children? Do they attend preschool or daycare? How much do you pay each week? If you don't have preschool age children, how much do you think it costs to send them to school each week? Keep those figures in mind as you listen to the remainder of this presentation. Hi, my name is Michelle Walker, and I am giving my Persuasion speech on universal preschool. Early education is an important component in the development of a child. By the age of 5, 90% of the child's brain development takes place, specifically the ages of 3 to 5. During this time frame, synapses in the brain are connecting to one another, and those connections are fueled by the child's learning environment. If a child is not in an environment that taps into that peak development brain functioning, the connections that should be taking place don't take place. Now, sometimes those connections can be restored later on in life, but once some of those connections are lost, they're lost forever. Missing those crucial development years puts a child behind academically. Some children are able to catch up, but some never catch up to their peers. I was a child who started off behind my peers because I was not exposed to the preschool environment. When I was placed in the first grade, I was placed in what was called a readiness class. This meant that I wasn't quite ready for first grade, but they couldn't leave me in kindergarten. And that also meant that once I completed this readiness first grade, I had to repeat first grade and do the normal first grade. Halfway through my readiness first grade year, my teacher got sick, and a long-term substitute was brought in to take over the remaining part of the school year. And she was a retired teacher. When she looked at me, she saw a bright child who just needed a little push. So she started working with me to bring me up to par. She also became my advocate, and in order to do this, first she got my parents' permission to advocate for me. So she began advocating with the principal and the school board to have me promoted to second grade next year rather than repeating the first grade. And it was a battle. The school didn't want to break protocol. It wasn't protocol for a child to be placed in readiness first grade and then get promoted to second grade. You had to repeat first grade. But in the end, we won, and I went on to second grade. But they did place me in a readiness second grade class. My second grade teacher, also seeing a bright student, went to the principal to see if I could get placed in a regular second grade classroom. But they didn't feel that I was ready. So she began to document and observe what I was doing in the classroom. So each week she would give me a textbook, a reading textbook on Monday. I would read that book all week. And on Friday, she would test my comprehension to make sure I was learning from the book what I should be learning. And she would document that as proof that I did understand what I was reading. And she did this over 6 weeks. And during those 6 weeks, I went through a whole school year of reading material in just 6 weeks. At the end of the 6 weeks, she proved, and I also proved because I had to perform the work, she proved that I was ready to be placed in a regular second grade class. But unfortunately, at that time, the classrooms were all full, so I could not move into the upper level second grade class. But what the principal did agree to do was to pull me out for reading. So for reading, I would go to another classroom where the children were on a upper level reading level. So with the help of my teachers, I moved from the back of the class to the head of the class. because the following year, when it was time to start third grade, they did not place me in a readiness third grade, but they placed me in the upper level third grade class. I not only caught up with my peers, but I moved ahead of some, and I did it in record time. For most children, it takes several years for them to catch up to their peers, if they're going to catch up at all. This is why I am a strong believer in the mandated universal preschool. While I did catch up to my peers and pass some of them, I often wonder, if I had been exposed to a preschool education, could I have been even smarter? Maybe I would have been a child genius. Possibly. Well, maybe I wouldn't have been a child genius, but at least I wouldn't have had to fight so hard to prove that I belonged with my regular classmates. Mandating universal preschool will give every child access to early education. Not only that, but it will take the income for early educators and bring them up to a more competitive level. And it will also lessen the burden that's associated with child care costs. Look at the faces of the children in this picture. They come from different backgrounds, but they're all sitting in a preschool classroom, so they're all getting the same head start. Don't you think every child deserves this? I live on the East Coast of the United States of America. And on the East Coast, we have the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. This bridge connects the state of Maryland's eastern shore to its western shore. The bridge is approximately 17.5 miles long. And in its deepest part, it is approximately 175 feet deep. Now imagine driving this toy remote control car across this bridge daily. Inside of this car is a microchip filled with valuable information, and the only way to get it from one shore to the other shore is traveling across this bridge. And you do this daily. But one day, a gap appears in the bridge, and you were not given the memo. So you set out to remotely drive this car across the bridge to get it across to the other side. And then you realize you've lost connection because the car plummeted off the bridge and into the water. You hire a search team to frantically look for this car or the missing microchip. Despite your best efforts, the car and the chip is lost forever. And unfortunately, there was no backup file because you didn't create one. And this is what happens to a child's brain when they do not receive the benefits of a quality preschool education. The connections in their brain never meet, or let's say the two sides of the bridge, they never meet together. So the information is traveling along and then it just falls into an abyss. Now, sometimes the brain can reroute information and find a way around to get to the connection of the brain that it needs to be. But unfortunately, sometimes those connections just don't happen. The brain just cannot rewire that information. And so the information is lost forever. Preschool educators are trained to tap into that brain activity through rich learning environments and experiences. They know how to support those connections through meaningful play. It is through those learning activities and meaningful play that those brain connections are retained and strengthened. Part of the Universal Preschool Initiative is seeking to make preschool a part of the public school system. In doing so, the pay for those working in that field will increase because they're going from a job to now a professional career. So many preschool teachers are making just a little over minimum wage, but they are expected to be highly qualified. I know preschool teachers with master's degree, and they're making less money than people working at a fast food restaurant. Now, how fair is that? How can we expect early educators to be highly qualified, but then allow them to make minimum wages or the bare minimum? How do we justify that? We can't. Do you recall the figures I told you to keep in mind at the beginning of the presentation? If not, that's okay. I have some statistics for you. The average cost of childcare in the U.S. is $9,600 per year per child. And then that, if you do the math on that, that's about $200 per week per child. And most families have at least 2 children. So this again is per child. There are some centers that the pay is less, but there are also some centers where the cost is even higher. I looked at one center in Massachusetts, and it cost $20,000 per year per child. $20,000 per year per child. But for this presentation, we're just going to focus on $9,600 per year per child. By doing the math, this would mean that we're paying $200 per week per child. And if you have 2 children, because that's the average amount of children in a family, that would be $400 per week that you're paying in childcare costs. And the average income in the U.S. is $56,516 per year, or about $1,177 per week. The problem with that amount is that most are not making anywhere close to $56,516 per year. Those are based on averages that include jobs in the professional and corporate fields. Most families make anywhere from $28,000 to $40,000 a year. So if you average, that out, it would be about $34,000 a year. So, in looking at the $34,000 a year, which is average that most families are making, that would be about $708 per week. Okay, $708 per week. Now, for the 2 children, that's $400 coming out every week for the 2 kids in childcare, which leaves a balance of $308. So childcare is more than half of a family's weekly income. And from what's left over, they still have to pay for the basic necessities like food, shelter, gas for the vehicle so they can get to work and get their children to school. This is why many children go without a quality preschool education, because the family simply can't afford to send their children. So when those children start kindergarten, they are already at a disadvantage because of those missing connections or lost connections. And this sets the stage for years of struggle. Together, let's bridge the gap in achievement by supporting universal preschool. Our future depends on it. Children of today are the leaders and innovators of tomorrow. Let's give them the support they need today so that they can excel in their future. If we do this now, years from now, we will have a society full of members thriving and making a positive contribution to the U.S. and to the world. Support universal preschool. Thank you.